Hampshire.
I wish I could stand here and agree with the senator from Montana. I wish that as I looked at these bills that have just passed the House and now that we're getting the trailer bill, the buy-it bill, the bill that was used to purchase the votes in the House to pass the big bill, that I could say that America's children are going to be better off, that the people who have health care issues in this country are going to be better off. But that's impossible to say. Why is it impossible to say? Because this bill, as it passed the House, was an atrocity. It was an explosion of government, the likes of which we've never seen in this country before. It grows the government by $2.6 trillion. And in the process, it will interfere with almost every American who has private health insurance and how they get their insurance. And it will take Americans who have health insurance today and it will push them out of that health insurance as the small employers across this country decide that they can no longer afford it. And it will say to Medicare recipients, we're going to cut your Medicare by $1 trillion when this is fully implemented, $1 trillion. And we're going to take that money and we're going to use it to fund a brand new entitlement over here for people who aren't on Medicare, who aren't seniors. And we're going to use it to expand other entitlements for people who aren't on Medicare and who aren't seniors. And then the Medicare recipients who have seen their program reduced by $1 trillion are going to be left with a program that remains on a path to insolvency, a path which will inevitably lead to lesser quality of care for people who get Medicare because providers will find themselves forced out of the system. And people who are on Medicare Advantage will virtually find that that insurance plan is eliminated. So this bill has a lot of major problems, the big bill that passed the House. And now we get this trailer bill, this buy-it bill, which was used for the purposes of getting votes in the House. And this bill aggravates the fundamental problems of the bigger bill that the President signed today. This bill adds more costs, creates more taxes, and will reduce Medicare viability in a more significant way, and yet it's called good policy. Very hard to understand that. When you look at these bills as a combination, especially when you put them in the context that thrown on this train was the nationalization of the student loan program, where 19 million students today are going to be forced into the process of getting their loans through the federal government instead of through their local banks, their community banks. And when you look at this in that context, what this bill is really about, and the President's been very forthright about this, is a massive explosion in the size of the government. Growing the government for one fundamental purpose, because this administration believes that a bigger government creates prosperity. Well, we don't believe that on our side of the aisle. We believe that there is a lot of good things that could have been done to make health care better. I've offered a proposal to do that. Other senators, Senator Barrasso has a proposal to do that. They would have all addressed the health insurance issues of making sure that everybody could get coverage if you have a pre-existing condition. All these straw dogs that are being thrown up as the reasons why this bill had to be passed, they would have all been taken care of if a more reasonable bill had been passed. But what wouldn't have happened wouldn't have been this massive explosion in the size of the federal government, which will inevitably pass on to our children, a government they cannot afford. Under this bill, the cost of the federal government, which has traditionally been about 20% of our gross national product, will jump up around 25, 26, or 27% of gross national product. It will be unaffordable as a result of that. But they claim they pay for it. And the way they claim they pay for it primarily is to cut Medicare by $1 trillion when fully implemented. Now, this seems fundamentally unfair to the people on our side of the aisle. We all recognize that Medicare has serious problems. It's got a $38 trillion or $36 trillion unfunded liability. We all recognize that Medicare recipients depend on that program. And so if we're going to adjust Medicare payments, cut them as they do in this bill, eliminate programs like Medicare Advantage, for all intents and purposes, then those savings, as a matter of fairness, should stay with the Medicare system. I mean, that's what should happen. Those savings, which are huge in this bill, and I respect the fact that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle stepped up and made this massive attempt to cut Medicare. I mean, that was quite a decision on their part. But what they did was they took those savings, which should have gone to giving senior citizens a stronger and more vibrant program, and they took them and they started brand new programs, brand new entitlements and expansions of other existing entitlements, none of which have anything to do with Medicare or senior citizens. So essentially, they're funding this program in large part on the backs of the seniors of this country without doing anything substantive, which will in the long run make Medicare more solvent. And in fact, they basically doubled down on the problem because we know Medicare's headed into insolvency, and then they've created these new entitlements, and we know the record of the government around here on the issue of entitlements. We always underfund them. The promises are made, but they are never kept. And so this will all end up rolling into a giant ball, like a huge, massive asteroid headed at Earth, which is basically going to land on our children's heads as debt. That's what we're headed towards here. We already know we have a government we can't afford. The debt of this country is going to double in the next 5 years under the president's budget. It's going to triple in the next 10 years under the president's budget. It's going to get to a level of unsustainability within 5 to 7 years. We're already seeing the warning signs. The Chinese are telling us they may not want to buy our debt, and they're the ones who are financing us. Moody's says we may have to have our ratings looked at. Even Warren Buffett's debt today, this week, for the first time, sold at a better premium than the United States debt. What does that mean? People have more confidence Warren Buffett will pay them back than the United States. That's a pretty serious sign when the United States is supposed to be the best creditor in the world. And yet what this bill does, at its core on fiscal policy, is to radically expand the size of government, and we all know it won't be paid for. And so we all know that it will significantly, probably radically, expand the debt that our children are going to bear. We are inevitably not going to pass on to our children a healthier country fiscally. We're going to pass on to our children a sicker country fiscally. And are we going to get better health care for it? I seriously doubt it. I think we'll hear from Dr. Barrasso about how he sees this affecting health care. And other members of our side of the aisle have some expertise in this area. Because inevitably, when you start these major government programs, which essentially amount to quasi-nationalizations of different areas of the American economy, you end up with less quality. It's inherent in having the government run things. So the first amendment we're going to offer here today is to try to straighten out this incredible inequity that we would be paying for these new entitlements for uninsured Americans and for people on Medicaid with senior citizens' dollars by cutting the Medicare program by over $1 trillion when fully implemented. And so we have an amendment which says essentially this: you cannot reduce the Medicare spending if CBO cannot tell us that the other expenditures in this bill are paid for with something other than Medicare. It is a hard and fast commitment that Medicare savings will go to benefit Medicare. And that should be our purpose here. I know some of my other colleagues wish to talk on this, so I would ask, first I would send an amendment to the desk.